Bruce Lipton once said that the moment you change the way you see yourself, your cells will change the way they serve you. That is not poetry, that is biology. And yet, it is also the deepest kind of poetry because it means that the shift you feel inside is not just a thought passing through your mind. It is a tremor that runs through the fabric of your being. I know you may have imagined that awakening would arrive as an endless sunrise in your heart, a flood of bliss, so powerful that all your pain would vanish overnight. But the truth is gentler, stranger, and far more intimate. For many, it begins not with light, but with a restlessness they can't explain, a faint dissonance between who they've been and who they are becoming. You may have felt it lately, a certain unease that lingers even in quiet moments. It's not exactly sadness, but it isn't peace either, a kind of spiritual homesickness, as if your inner world no longer fits the shape it once had. Science tells us that your cells are listening to your perception of reality, adjusting their chemistry to match your identity. When that identity begins to shift, when the quiet voice of your I am starts to stir, the old programming does not leave without a sound. The body remembers every story it was told about who you are, and in the first stages of awake, it begins to loosen its grip on. Neville Goddard called I am the seed of all creation, claiming it is not merely saying the words, but allowing your entire chemistry to reorganize around a new self-image. And just like a seed germinating underground, there is a moment when nothing seems to be happening on the surface, yet inside, everything is changing. This stage is not about becoming something new, but about shedding what was never truly you. Like the snake sliding out of its old skin, you are revealing what has always been beneath. Perhaps you've noticed that the people, habits, or dreams that once defined you now feel like clothing that doesn't fit. That is not loss. That is the release of a skin too tight for the soul you are growing into. And yes, it can feel raw, vulnerable, exposed. But even in that discomfort, there is a quiet promise. You are not regressing. You are not failing. You are being prepared to live at a frequency that your old self could not sustain. So, if you have been feeling strange lately, if your emotions seem unpredictable, if your body speaks in unfamiliar way, take a breath. This is not chaos. It is the first sign that your I am is awake. You are stepping into a conversation between your spirit and your cell, and though the language is subtle, it is already rewriting the story of who you are. And in that still, mysterious dialogue, your true self is answering back, I am here, the cellular restlessness before the leap. There comes a point when the body begins to speak in ways the mind does not fully understand. Irritations that rise and fall without reason, sudden waves of emotion that feel too big for the moment you're in, fatigue that settles into your muscles, even on days when you have done very little. This is not weakness. It is not random. It is the language of a subconscious loosening its hold on the old definitions of who you believed yourself to be. Those definitions have lived not just in your thoughts, but in the very chemistry of your cells. And when they are challenged by a higher vision of your identity, the body responds with movement, a restlessness that is both physical and energetic. Bruce Lipton's work shows that when your perception of yourself or your environment shifts, the receptors on your cells adjust their sensitivity. It is as if the body is leaning forward, straining toward a new set of instructions. At first, that shift can feel uncomfortable because your biology is still patterned to serve the version of you that you are leaving behind. Your cells have been faithfully obeying the beliefs you have held for years, perhaps decades. Now, they are learning a new language, and in the learning, they become unsettled. This is not a malfunction. It is an awakening at the microscopic level. It is easy to think that discomfort means you are slipping back, but in truth, it is the nervous system recalibrating to a new vibrational baseline. Your body is like a tuning. It hums with the frequency it knows best. When you begin to change that frequency, it takes time for the resonance to stabilize. There may be days when you feel pulled in two directions, the old vibration trying to hold you, and the new one calling you forward. This tension is not a sign to stop. It is proof that the transformation is underway. You might notice that certain thoughts seem to provoke a physical reaction. A memory surfaces, and suddenly your shoulders tense. A possibility crosses your mind, and your heartbeat changes. These are not coincidences. They are the living record of the stories your body has stored. By simply paying attention to these moments, you start to see the map of your inner chain. Over time, you realize that your discomfort often follows the exact moment when you brushed against the edges of your new self. Think of a house. After a renovation, the walls are painted, The floors are polished, the light has changed, but for weeks you still hear small creaks and shifts as the structure settles into its new shape. These are not faults in the design. They are the natural sounds of stability forming. Your body works the same way. The restlessness is not a flaw. It is the creaking of a soul adjusting its foundations. And somewhere beneath the unease, if you listen closely, you can feel the truth pressing forward. You are not falling apart. You are settling into who you were always meant to be. The moment your inner narrative breaks, there is a moment, quiet yet unmistakable, when the story you have been telling yourself no longer fits. It doesn't shatter with a loud crack. It simply loses its weight. The words that once defined your life start to sound like lines from someone else's script. The memories you use to replay with such intensity begin to fade, not because you have forgotten them, but because they no longer hold the same power over. This can be an unsettling space. It often feels like emptiness before joy, a hollowing out that leaves you wondering who you are without the narrative you've carried for so long. In the brain, this is more than a poetic moment. The default mode network, the web of connections responsible for self-referential thinking, begins to quiet its old loops. Bruce Lipton's research tells us that as your beliefs shift, your biology follows suit. The neurons that once fired in unison to reinforce your old identity now start to branch into new pathways, searching for connections that reflect your emerging self. This is the rewiring of a life from the inside out. It is a biological affirmation that the I am you are claiming is not just an idea, but an instruction written into the cells themselves. Yet in the space between the old loops and the new ones, there can be silence. And in that silence, you might feel lost. It is tempting to run back to the familiar, to pick up the old story just to fill the void. But the void is not an absence. It is the fertile ground where new identity takes root. What you feel as nothingness is actually the clearing of space for a version of you that does not yet have words. This is why awakening often feels more like dismantling than becoming, because before you can live in a new story, the old one must dissolve. Sometimes this shift reveals itself in the smallest ways. You catch yourself no longer reacting to an old trigger. You realize that a thought you once believed without question now feels foreign. You notice that your own voice, the one inside your mind, has grown quieter, softer, perhaps even kinder. These are signs that the identity you once defended is no longer your home. It is like erasing outdated software from a device. Before the new program can be installed, the old code must be wiped clean. That erasure can feel like loss, but it is not loss. It is liberation. It is the moment when your inner narrative loosens its hold and makes room for something truer. And somewhere in that strange stillness, your soul is whispering, I am not who I was, and I am not yet who I will be. I am the space in between, the quantum disorientation. There comes a stage in transformation that feels like standing on a bridge in thick fog. You know you have left the shore behind, yet the new land is not in sight. Every step feels uncertain, not because you're moving in the wrong direction, but because you no longer have the old markers to guide. This is the quantum disorientation phase, a place where your mind, body, and spirit are no longer in agreement about what is real. In these moments, the brain searches for patterns it can predict. When it cannot find them, it sends signals of discomfort, even fear. This is not a flaw it is the natural response of a system built to survive through familiarity. Bruce Lipton's insights remind us that when your perception shifts, the electromagnetic signature of your body shifts with it. You are no longer broadcasting the same frequency, and the world begins to respond to this new signal in ways your old self cannot fully anticipate. The mirrors you once relied on no longer reflect the same image back to you. This loss of predictive control can feel like freefall. The temptation is to label it as failure or regression, but in truth, it is expansion. You are moving from a particle, fixed, defined, measurable, into the waveform of infinite potential. It is a space where possibilities have not yet crystallized into matter, and while it can be deeply unsettling, it is also the birthplace of creation. You are no longer confined to the probabilities of your old identity. You are now touching the quantum field of what could. There will be days in this phase when your thoughts feel scattered, when decisions seem harder to make, when even your own reflection feels unfamiliar. These are signs that the scaffolding of the old reality is dissolving. You may feel as though you have stepped out of sync with the rest of the world. And in a way, your vibration is no longer matching the patterns you once inhabited. This mismatch is not a gap to be closed. It is a passageway to be crossed. Imagine the caterpillar in its cocoon. In that sealed darkness, it does not simply grow wings. It dissolves completely into a formless state. To the caterpillar's old self, this would feel like death. But within that dissolution, the blueprint of the butterfly already exists, waiting to be called into form. You are in that same alchemy. And though your mind may resist this unshaped space, your soul knows it as the field of becoming. It is here, in the formless, that your I am gathers the energy it needs to take flight. The subtle language of synchronicities. There is a language the universe speaks that is softer than words and quieter than thought. It is the language of synchronicities, those delicate alignments that appear in the rhythm of your days, almost unnoticed unless you are paying attention. Most people overlook them because they expect awakening to announce itself in grand gestures. They wait for a vision, a revelation, a moment so undeniable that life splits into before and after. But the truth is that transformation often speaks in smaller tone, in the alignment of seemingly ordinary moments. Bruce Lipton reminds us that when the conscious and subconscious reach coherence, the outer world naturally begins to reflect the inner state. This reflection doesn't always arrive with fanfare. It may be the sudden appearance of a book that answers a question you've been silently asked, a phrase overheard in passing that feels like it was meant for you, a repeated symbol, number, or song that follows you for days, carrying a meaning only you can decode. These subtle patterns are not random. They are early alignment pings, the universe's way of telling you that your energy is beginning to match the reality you have been moving toward. It is tempting to dismiss these moments as coincidence, but coincidence is only the word we use when we do not yet see the deeper order. When you notice these patterns and give them your quiet attention, something shifts. You begin to realize that life is not a series of unrelated events, but a woven fabric where every thread responds to the colors you carry inside. Small synchronicities are like the first green shoots breaking through the soil, easy to miss if you are looking for a fully grown tree, yet powerful proof that life has begun to rise. Sometimes, these signs feel almost too personal to share. They might bring a sudden sense of warmth or a shiver that runs through you, as if reality itself is brushing against your skin. They often appear when you most need reassurance, but not in the way you expect, and that is the beauty. They bypass the mind's demands and speak directly to the part of you that is already awake. When you begin to live in conversation with these synchronicities, something inside softens. You stop needing the universe to shout its presence. You begin to trust its whispers, and in that trust, your path unfolds with a kind of grace that does not need to be forced. The signs have always been there. It is only now, in your awake, that you are ready to hear. Emotional detox as a spiritual upgrade. There are seasons in awakening when it feels as if the past is returning in waves. Old memories surface without warning, bringing with them emotions you thought you had already laid to rest. At first, it can feel like regression, as if all the inner work you've done is being undone. But what is truly happening is more profound. Your body and mind are offering you these emotions one last time so they can be rewritten. The resurface is not a step back. It is the final release of a weight you were never meant to carry. Neuroscience calls this process emotional memory reconsolidation. It is the brain's way of retrieving an old emotional file, reviewing and allowing it to be recoded with a new meaning. Bruce Lipton's research adds another dimension to this. When your beliefs shift, they change the biochemical signals that flow through your body. This means that the very chemistry tied to your old pain can be altered, leaving you with a different physiological reality. What you are experiencing is not just an emotional shift, but a biological one. These moments of emotional detox can be intense. You may find yourself crying without knowing why, or feeling a sudden heaviness in your chest. The body is intelligent. It knows when it is safe enough to release what it has held. When your I am identity begins to stabilize, it creates that safety, and in response, the nervous system opens its archives. The pain rises, not to harm you, but to leave. The process is often subtle. One day, an old memory returns, and instead of breaking you open, it meets a different version of a self who can see it with compassion rather than judgment. In that moment, the memory changes. The charge dissolves. It is as if the story can finally exhale. You may feel lighter, clearer, more spacious inside. And yet, there is no dramatic trumpet to announce the change. It happens quietly, like the clearing of dust in a sunlit room. That dust was always there, suspended in the air. The sunlight didn't create it, it revealed it. In the same way, your awakening doesn't create your wounds. It illuminates them so they can be seen and released. This is the upgrade, not the avoidance of pain, but the transformation. And as each wave passes, you will notice something remarkable. What once felt like a threat now feels like a teacher. The emotions that once defined you are no longer the home you live. They are simply travelers who have completed their journey. The final confirmation that your I am is already here. There is a moment in the awakening journey when you realize that the change you were waiting has already happened. It does not arrive with fireworks. It does not announce itself with grand visions. It comes quietly, often in the middle of an ordinary day, when something that used to wound you deep no longer draws the same reaction. A person's words, once capable of shaking your peace, now pass through you like wind moving through an open field. An old fear, once heavy as stone, feels lighter, as if it has lost its grip. That is the sign, not the absence of challenge, but the absence of the old chain that bound you to it. Bruce Lipton's work reminds us that once your perception shifts, your biology follows. The chemistry of your cell begins to mirror the identity you hold. You become, in a very real and physical sense, the embodiment of your chosen self. This is not theory. It is the lived proof that consciousness and biology are not separate. They move together, and in you, they have found a new harmony. Joe Dispenza often speaks of the union between elevated emotion and clear intention, how this combination can change the electromagnetic field of the body in measurable ways. When you live from your I am, that combination becomes your natural state. You are no longer trying to feel joy, forcing yourself to think positive. The joy rises without effort, and the thoughts align without struggle. This coherence sends a signal into the field around you, and life begins to shape itself in response. The real confirmation of awakening is subtle. It is not in the sudden arrival of everything you once dreamed. It is in the way you respond to life before those dreams arrive. You notice that the desperation has faded, that the urgency to control has softened. You can be in the presence of uncertainty and still feel steady. You can meet disappointment without collapsing into despair. This is emotional neutrality, not indifference, but the deep note you remain whole, regardless of the outer picture. And then, when you look back, you see it clearly. The climb you thought was endless is behind you. You have been breathing the thinner air of higher altitudes without even noticing. And it is only when you pause that you realize how far you have come. There is no going back, not because you couldn't, but because the person you once were no longer exists in the same way. This is the final confirmation. You are no longer becoming, you are being. And in the stillness of that realization, the words rise from somewhere deep within. I am already here. My cells know it. My life is becoming. The awakening of your I am is not a single moment carved in life. It is a series of subtle rearrangements that accumulate until your life becomes something you could not have imagined from the place you began. It is the body releasing the stories it has carried for years. It is the mind loosening its grip on the narratives that no longer serve. It is the soul reclaiming the seat at the center of your being, whispering truths you once thought were beyond your reach. There will still be days of uncertainty. There will still be moments when old patterns knock at your door, but you will meet them differently now. You will notice the space between their arrival and your response, a space filled with presence, choice, and the quiet power of alignment. This space is the proof of transformation. It is the evidence that the inner work has woven itself into the fabric of your life. Awakening does not erase your humanity, it deepens it. You become more able to feel without being consumed, more willing to listen without needing to defend, more capable of standing still while life moves around you, trusting that the current will carry you where you are meant to go. You are no longer defined by what you fear, but by the truth you now live. And as you walk forward, you may find that you no longer seek constant signs or reassurance, not because they are absent, but because you have become the sign. You are the alignment you once hoped to attract. Your presence is the proof. Let these words settle in you, not as a teaching to remember, but as a reality to inhabit. I am already here. My cells know. My life is becoming. Every breath is part of this become, and every step, no matter how small, is taken on the ground of a new self. The journey is not toward your I am. The journey is from it, into the world that will meet you there.